This footage showing British troops torturing Iraqi prisoners in 2003 was one of the first in a series of images revealing a culture of impunity amongst UK forces occupying Iraq between 2003 and 2009.
So you have a pattern of putting sleep deprivation, long-standing of beatings, and sexual and religious humiliation.
I saw soldiers from my battalion striking these prisoners, open-handed, closed-handed, with boots, with rifles.
Following a 6-year preliminary examination, the International Criminal Court's lead prosecutor concluded in December 2020 that there was a reasonable basis to believe British troops had committed war crimes and torture.
ومارسوا بحقي كل أساليب التعذيب والتعذيب النفسي والجسدي.
The preliminary examination also raised credible allegations of rape and murder. Nevertheless, the ICC decided to abandon its inquiry. 2 months later, Dominique Ongwen was handed a guilty verdict by the ICC for atrocities committed as a commander of the Lord's Resistance Army in Uganda between 2002 and 2005, including murder, torture, and rape.
Dominique Ongwen has been found guilty beyond reasonable doubt.
Why the ICC decided to pursue one case and not the other has reignited claims that the court has an African bias.
Those people who has been indicted by ICC, 99% are Africans.
Of the court's current 14 active investigations, 12 involve African and Middle Eastern states, and all of the 30 cases brought before the court have been against African nationals, causing many to question, is the International Criminal Court racist?
We all understand that the International Criminal Court is a court of last resort. There must be a court that stands up for those who cannot defend themselves.
Established in 1998, but founded in 2002, the ICC was created to punish the worst of humanity when national courts failed to prosecute.
The history of the ICC in a lot of ways goes back to the Nuremberg trials to prosecute people individually for major crimes committed during wartime.
The tribunal sentences you to death by hanging.
They never looked into the atrocities that the US, that Britain, that Australia had also committed during the Second World War. So there's always been this concern with international law that it was a tool of the victors, of the powerful states. The purpose of the International Criminal Court is to create this global permanent court that can deal with crimes against humanity wherever they happen around the world.
And those are war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and the crime of aggression.
123 countries are currently members of the ICC, but a few global superpowers are noticeably absent, including the United States, Russia, and China.
The court must be allowed the proper space to focus on its duties, free from unwarranted resistance.
But not all countries are on board with being investigated.
As far as America is concerned, the ICC has no jurisdiction, no legitimacy, and no authority.
As a member of the UN Security Council, the US can still refer cases to the ICC, as it did with Libya in 2011. However, when it comes to their own conduct in Iraq and Afghanistan,
we will provide no assistance to the ICC, and we certainly will not join the ICC. For all intents and purposes, the ICC is already dead to us.
Despite not being affiliated, the ICC is able to investigate the US if the alleged war crimes take place within any of its member states. However, when the ICC launched an inquiry into atrocities in Afghanistan, a member of the court, Trump responded by issuing an executive order and slapping sanctions on the lead prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, and members of her staff.
We will take all necessary measures to protect our citizens from this renegade, unlawful, so-called court.
These attacks constitute an escalation and an unacceptable attempt to interfere with the rule of law and the court's judicial proceedings.
The UK, which is a member of the ICC, has rebuffed its scrutiny by saying they could handle the investigation of their own soldiers for war crimes themselves, and created the Overseas Operations Bill, which would eliminate the possibility of UK soldiers being prosecuted for crimes committed abroad after 5 years.
The suggestion that the best trained and best led armed forces in the world are somehow predisposed to inflicting torture or sex crimes on operations is frankly ridiculous.
It's right that this government sticks by its pledge to say, look, we don't want vexatious investigations.
وأنا أطلب من القضاء والمحكمة الجنائية الدولية أن تنظر بقضيتي وأن تتخذ إجراءات بصالحنا وضد قوات البريطانية بصالحنا وشكرا.
The UK authorities were telling the ICC that, look, we don't need you because our domestic authorities are investigating these actions in Iraq. What makes this decision particularly egregious? That there's plenty of evidence that the UK authorities are not serious about looking into those crimes.
As of 2017, the British Ministry of Defence has only convicted one soldier, but has also paid out £19.8 million in out-of-court settlements in 326 cases, out of a further 1,145 claims that are related to conduct of British forces in Iraq. The UK has also paid out an undisclosed amount to victims or their relatives in an additional 4,400 cases. Individuals like Ugandan rebel leader Joseph Kony to Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, son and one-time heir apparent of Libya's fallen leader Muammar, have been indicted for various crimes, including genocide, with a total of 35 arrest warrants since 2002 and a cumulative budget of over €2 billion.
The overall sentence imposed on you shall therefore be 30 years of imprisonment.
123 countries have joined the ICC, so it's approximately 2/3 of the countries in the world.
And it's been a real frustration for many affected populations in African states. It's only ever gone after rebel leaders or relatively small actors in these conflicts. It shows a real reluctance on the part of the ICC to go after much more powerful political actors. And as long as it continues down that vein, I think it will always struggle to get rid of this reputation that it's ultimately a colonial tool.
And of the 9 individuals they have convicted over the past 2 decades, 7 have been from the Democratic Republic of Congo.
The Global South pushed to have these crimes to be qualified as international crimes. The use of mercenaries or international drug trafficking or terrorism or colonialism or willful destruction of the environment. But European states and Western powers were against this, and then they ended up winning this struggle.
The US, the UK, Russia, China, Germany, they really tried to constrain the creation of the ICC to avoid the kinds of things that they were involved in around the world, which is often about powerful states invading the territory of weaker states and engaging in that kind of neo-colonial activity.
On Friday, President Bush signed into law the American Service Members Protection Act of 2002, which will supposedly protect U.S. service members from the International Criminal Court.
So the United States can actually say to the International Criminal Court, please, can you start a case in South Sudan? General Omar al-Bashir must answer to these cases. Yet the United States itself and all its citizens are exempt from the same laws that they are compelling everybody to go through. This is very problematic for us in Africa.
Both the prosecution and the defense at the ICC have never used a single African investigator. They'd never been to any part of Africa before they started investigating these very complicated crimes.
My view is that racism is not the problem, but racism is a symptom of the problem.
The ICC is an anti-colonialism tool. What should I do? I know I should do a Scottish guy or a Swedish guy before I do a black guy. No, I don't care about race. I have to protect the victims. That's my job.
Stuck between a moral rock and a colonial hard place, some African leaders have threatened to leave the ICC, with Burundi jumping ship in 2017, calling it unfair and racist. And it's not just Burundi. The Philippines have also left the court after preliminary accusations against Duterte and other top officials were investigated for mass murder and crimes against humanity that occurred during the infamous drug crackdown.
Please do not drag me into that ICC. I will not submit to you, you idiots.
And the government of Burundi also said we're going to pull out of the court. That doesn't actually take away the jurisdiction of the court.
Burundi is pulling out of the International Criminal Court 6 months after the court indicated it would investigate the violence which killed hundreds of people.
The ICC often points out that most African cases have been self-referrals.
Many African states have realised that it's very useful to have the ICC come and investigate these cases, to deal with their enemies, to deal with non-state actors, as long as they don't start snooping into what governments have also been doing during these conflicts.
We need a Magna Carta for global systems. The national state is the most important legal design to protect us, but it was done in the 17th century, 18th century democratic one.
The court has recently broadened its focus to investigate war crimes committed by the Taliban, but also U.S. forces in Afghanistan, and is also investigating Russia for crimes committed in Georgia.
I think the ICC is bound to always be used for reasons that go beyond just the legal questions.
I'm one of those extremely frustrated supporters of the ICC. If the court lived up to what it says it's going to do in its own statute, then it would be a force for good. Then, without fear or favour, it would investigate and prosecute cases around the world. But what we've seen is a highly politicised court that hasn't gone after the most powerful actors.